Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Interactive Wrestling Radio right here on WrestlingEpicenter.com and YouTube. Joining me on the line right now is our co-hosts, Mr. Patrick Kelly.
Howdy, y'all.
And Mr. Nick Knoll.
Chael Sonnen is a better promo cutter than 99.9% of the WWE roster.
Ouch. Who's that? Who's a better promo cutter?
The UFC guy that went nuts.
Oh, yeah.
People are saying he went nuts. That's basically all he's been saying for the last year. This is nothing new from him.
Oh, wow. I can't speak to it because I just don't follow MMA enough. I watch it when it's on, but you know, I just don't follow it enough.
Yeah, who else is a good promo cutter? Rampage Jackson, when he's like in the zone and stuff.
He is a good promo cutter, but you know what he is not?
Mr. T?
He's not Mr. T.
Oh, God. And you think it ever dawned on Piper how stupid that storyline was? Like, So I'm going to pay Ted DiBiase a bunch of money so I can beat up a UFC fighter who happens to play the same character as Mr. T.
Yeah, that was retarded. That wasn't well thought out.
Yeah. Well, speaking of not
well thought out angles,
Piper also, speaking of that, there you go. Patrick with a great segue there. I was actually going to make another comment about Piper, but yeah, that's a great segue.
You can make your other comment.
Our top 5 list this week is going to be the top 5 angles that never really finished. The most disappointing angles is how we're phrasing it. The angles that you saw that really piqued your interest and then never really went anywhere. And I think that we all have quite a few of those that we can name. But for now, I am going to turn it over to Nick Knoll to kick off the list.
All right. Needless to say, Patrick and I both agreed that this is a hard list to do, not because there wasn't enough of them, because there were so many out there in just the history of professional wrestling. And number 5 for me is going to be a little controversial, and that is the NWO. And I understand that the NWO went on and on and on and on, but there was never really a satisfactory ending to the angle. There was no moment where it's like WCW beats it and finally, overcomes the threat. It was just, it goes away for a little bit and look what's back, or there's 2 NWOs. So, I mean, I honestly feel like that the angle would be much more better remembered if there had been a clear end to the feud. If, like, after Sting beat Hogan at, Super Bowl 98, that was the end of the NWO somehow.
Oh, Super Bowl 98, yeah, that was the one where he actually beat him.
Yeah, that was we got to make up for Starrcade. So, anyway, moving on to number 4, and I want to preference this. Sometimes angles get dropped, not because of creative or something goes, or, they just forget about it. It's because something happens in a person's life that changes their direction of takes them out of the wrestling ring, whether it be an injury. In this case, it's a death, and that was Jeff Jarrett versus Robert Roode in TNA a couple years ago. I was really enjoying that feud. I personally think that if it had gone on, it would have taken Roode to that next level. Unfortunately, Jeff Jarrett's wife at the time, Jill, passed away, and Jeff had much more important things to deal with than a wrestling angle. So that's my number 4, and I just kind of want to preference that. Number 3, the infamous WCW White Hummer. For the longest damn time, we tried to figure out who tried to kill Kevin Nash. Lex Luger told us it was Hulk Hogan because he drove a black Hummer, but we never did find out who the fuck was driving that white one.
Now, I'll jump in a minute. You finish your list, and then I'll jump in on that. All
right. Number 2, CM Punk's straight edge title reign. When he was the king of SmackDown, he was the heel. He was supposed to take over the whole company, and then he just drops it to The Undertaker and becomes Daffy Duck. And number 1 is very, very recent, but I think it does deserve to be number 1, and that is CM Punk's walkout and the subsequent fallout, where pretty much he comes back, he has one match with John Cena, and then he drops it to Alberto Del Rio, and right now CM Punk's pretty much just back to being a random mid-card guy that kind of gets fused with main eventers.
Oh, he's Triple H's buddy now, apparently.
Yeah, which makes no goddamn sense. Like, look, I'm sorry, CM Punk and Sheamus should not be hanging out with John Cena, given all their history, and given all the shit that CM Punk and Triple H have said to each other over the last few months. They should not be saving each other. They should be the quote-unquote, I know Paul Heyman's favorite angle in the world, the partners that hate each other.
Yeah, Paul Heyman did that a lot.
No, he did it every other week.
Yeah. I mean, the main one that I remember, at least the freshest in my memory, was Candido and Storm. But they did a lot with all
that was probably the best one.
That was the best of them. Oh, yeah. And when they finally feuded, their matches were great, too. I mean, you got two guys that could work.
No, I mean, you had a great wrestler in Chris Candido, and you had a guy that could hold his own in Lance Storm. Even if he is just Chris Jericho's little buddy.
They're both great wrestlers. They're just Lance Storm just happens to have a big mouth these days.
No, Lance Storm is a good wrestler, kind of the same way that he's a good wrestler, but when you call him great, you drag the bar down 10 feet.
Ouch. Oh, can I get my list now?
Yeah, let Patrick give his list here, and let's see what we got.
Okie dokie. Well, my number 5 is similar to the White Hummer, and this was basically WWE's version of the White Hummer during that same time period. GTV, which was basically their mode of exposition for the longest time. They would use GTV to, expose secrets and humiliate the wrestlers and advance stories, but they never revealed who was actually behind it. And I've heard that it was supposed to be Goldust, and he left the company, but they still kept it going, and I think it continued for about a year, and we never found out who was actually behind it. So it just felt like a waste almost. My number 4 is similar to something that Nick said, but I'm going to take it a few years later. The NWO in the WWE. When Hogan Hall and Nash first came back to the WWE in 2002, it was like, oh God, this is going to be, it was exciting. It was like, holy shit, they actually picked up something good from WCW and they're going to use it. Because obviously after having lived through the WCW invasion angle, it wasn't very good. So to see them show up in the WWE was actually kind of cool. Now, various things got in the way that destroyed the WWE's NWO. Hogan got over as a babyface, and they had to turn him back to the red and yellow. Hall's personal problems came into play. And those two things right there basically took the life out of it. But, the WWE really, really hurt it with the booking by making, Austin made them look like bitches. They put Shawn Michaels into the group, which just didn't fit at all whatsoever. And it was just a mess of an angle and one of the big failures in the post-WCW takeover for the WWE. Okay, my number 3 is another one from the Attitude Era. Who ran over Stone Cold Steve Austin? I freaking loved this angle when they were doing it. I thought it was great. And then when they revealed it was Rikishi, I was like, oh, that's interesting. I never would have guessed that it would have been him. And they actually did, like, a good racism storyline with it, because normally racism storylines are one-dimensional and stupid. This one was actually really well done. And then Austin squashed Rikishi 2 or 3 times, and that was it. And then they just said it was Triple H. So, yeah, it was like, okay, so the guy who said that he was getting rid of Austin because he's white had to help the Samoan people was actually taking orders from a white guy who was the WWE champion the night that Austin got run over. All right, yeah, that makes sense. And my number 2 is I'm actually taking 2 of Nick's and combining them into one. CM Punk's career in the WWE. We have a lot of guys who we feel should be given more than what they're given, and if given the chance, could be amazing. Punk's one of those guys that actually made it to the top, became the hottest thing in the company twice, and they fucked him over both times. And that was in 2009 when he was the straight edge champion, and Undertaker had to get the belt back for whatever reason, and they pretty much killed whatever intrigue the SmackDown main event scene had for 2009 and 2010. And in my opinion, SmackDown never recovered from that decision. I mean, it's still a boring-ass show, and blame that decision for ruining the whole thing. And obviously this year, Punk kind of took over the world with his epic Raw promo. And after Money in the Bank, it was like, oh, shit, he's like the hottest thing in wrestling right now. He's the man. He's awesome. They bring him back after only being gone a week. And since then, it's just been lessened and lessened and lessened and lessened to the point that, yeah, Punk's still fun to watch, and he's still a good performer, and he still cuts good promos and everything, but the spark that he had a few months ago is just gone now, and that's a shame. So CM Punk, we'll just put him at number 2. And my number 1, and this was a few years ago, the Matt Hardy, Edge, Lita love triangle storyline. Again, this is another case of, this is a case where the WWE had lightning in a bottle. One of the greatest natural, emotional rivalries handed to you on a silver platter that was grounded in something that really happened. The fans bought into it before they even started the angle. And what do they do with it? They fucked it up royally. I mean, number 1, they rushed the match to SummerSlam, and the match at SummerSlam sucked monkey balls. And an angle that should have created 2 legit strong main eventers really only benefited Edge. And they didn't maximize their potential out of that angle, and the whole thing just feels like a missed opportunity rather than a great rivalry from a few years ago.
All right. Well, I think we're going to be in agreement on a lot of these here, guys, and I got a couple that I have to say, but let's start with my number 5 is ECW. Now, hear me out. The category is disappointing, so even though there was an ending to this, and it was a merciful ending, when the WWE brought back ECW, it was the most disappointed I think I've ever been in the WWE since the purchase of WCW. It was just like, really? You're going to bring it back and you're going to turn it into this? I mean, first of all, I want to make it clear, I was against doing it to begin with, and when they saw what they were doing with it, it was like, okay, if I watch this, my head's going to explode, so I watched the first show and that was it. I did not watch it ever again. Now that comes from a guy who watched the original ECW, and I think that if you watched the original ECW, you had a special place in your heart. You didn't want to see a crap ton like that. Anyway, the second, number 2, or number 4, I should say, and people are going to be. Nick kind of alluded to the fact that sometimes they're beyond control, and this one is one of them, and that is the loose cannon Brian Pillman storyline. And I don't just mean when he went crazy and grabbed Bobby Heenan, and Bobby Heenan said on air, "What the fuck are you doing?" I don't just mean that. I don't mean quitting on live TV and saying, "I respect you, Booker man," to Kevin Sullivan. That was cool stuff. But then right at that same time, he started showing up in ECW because WCW sent him there. And unfortunately, his contract expired around the same time that he got into a car accident. And with the car accident and the contract expiring, the entire steam of it was lost. Yes, he performed in the WWE. I still get pains in my stomach that the WWE Universe will never remember him as the amazing performer he was, and instead will remember the injured guy that we saw in 97 and in 1997, because the guy he was one of the best performers I've ever seen, period. So I think that the
back then, quite honestly, he was more of a promo guy when he was in the WWE, and I think, unfortunately, that's kind of what people remember.
Exactly. Well, if you go back to 95 WCW and anytime, basically anytime 89 to 95, but 95 is when he really was having just phenomenal matches with just about anybody. He really just had it all. I mean, he was amazing. And the funny thing was, we all considered him a small guy at the time, but he was 240 pounds, and we're all saying how much we love John Morrison, and he's like 218. So how small was he if you think about him now? But, okay, my number and that's just that character, the loose cannon character. Number 3, I have the White Hummer. I got to go with it. And Nick, to piggyback on what you were saying, they did explain the ending later on, and they said that it was Eric Bischoff who did it. And they did that when Bischoff ran the White Hummer into Hogan a couple of times on the April 10th thing. And I think they only did that to just end that bullcrap on the Internet. It's like, okay, fine, here's who did it, and then let's go. But that was just it was a ridiculous thing. Plus, who cared, because he was back like the next week anyway. So it was like, who really gives a crap? He's fine. Number 2, I have the Millionaires Club in WCW versus the New Blood. Another storyline that regardless if you loved it or hated it, it gave the company a direction. And for whatever reason, within 2 months, it had already started to fizzle. And, there was never an ending to it. It just kind of went away. Probably because they fired all the legends. And the last one was the NWO. And I'm just going to say the entire NWO. You could talk about the original NWO. You could talk about the 99 NWO with Bret Hart in them because of injuries ending that one. You could talk about the red and black, the white and black, the WWE version, all of them. That angle, the NWO angle, no matter who did it, and I'm excluding Japan because I just don't know enough about what they did there, no matter who did the NWO.
They actually did have an ending to it.
That did have an ending to it, okay.
Yeah,
any U.S. version of the NWO was royally screwed for various reasons, and we can go through all of them and why, but not one of them had a satisfactory ending. And I don't know why.
You could spend the whole 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. It was the most popular angle for such a long time, and they just never found a way to successfully end it. And, if you want to take a look at WCW and why it's not there anymore, it's kind of like, well, where did you have to go from the NWO? There's basically no next plan. It was NWO, and they dragged that out for as long as they could until Goldberg came around. So that was basically all they had.
And then they eventually pushed the NWO again over Goldberg.
Yep, and then Vince Russo left, and the NWO just became the Harris Brothers and Jeff Jarrett, and then they dropped that entirely, and there you go.
All right.
So now we got some things to discuss here, guys. So
well,
I'm going to say this. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, we all had the NWO on there in one form or another, so if we're willing to if Patrick's willing to say that we can combine the WWE NWO like James did and combine the whole NWO, we could have that on the list. I'd be willing just to combine all of CM Punk's career like Patrick did and put him at like number 2.
I'm agreeing with that. I think you got to have Lita and Edge and Hardy just because the sheer potential for that angle was unlimited, and they did nothing with it. I think that has to be on the list.
I agree. And I think, but James and I both have White Hummer.
White Hummer.
That's 4. And, okay.
How about Hacksaw Jim Duggan turning heel and joining Team Canada? There was never really a comeuppance for that.
I was actually going to say, I'd be willing to say Brian Pillman and the whole loose cannon story. Because that did have so much potential, and it could have played out in any of the 3, the 2 major companies and then the number 1 independent company at the time.
There you go. And they did. And to be fair, the WWE was using it at the very end when he died with the Terry angle, the angle with him and Terry.
They did continue that, didn't they?
They did pick it up again.
By the way, the shit that he did with Terry in the summer of '97 was some of the most early risque stuff that they were doing.
Pillman loved to push the envelope. I mean, people don't. If anybody wants to, I don't want to really advertise a WWE product because I know Nick would probably shoot me if I did, but I've got to say they did a really tasteful job with their Loose Cannon DVD, and I bought it the other day.
They did.
It had like $5 at Kmart, and I did pick it up, and it was like I was such a fan of his in the late '80s and early '90s, and the Loose Cannon thing was so interesting because you didn't know if it was legit or not.
Well, I actually agree with you, James. I will say this: while I trash most of the WWE, I do give their DVDs a pretty fair shake. I think that as long as they don't go too far into rewriting history, and the Brian Pillman angle, Brian Pillman DVD is a wonderful, is a very good DVD that does show and celebrate his whole career. So it is.
Unless your name is Randy Savage, or the Ultimate Warrior, your superstar specific DVD is typically going to be pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. But
they just released one on Hacksaw Jim Duggan too, by the way, guys.
Are you serious?
No, they didn't.
They kind of did. They did a Hall of Fame series one on him that features some of his matches. It's not like a documentary or anything, but it is like a best.
I know they've gone back and re-released some of their old VHSs as DVDs. I think a couple of Undertaker's, one of Shawn's. So they've done.
Yeah, they did.
So I know Hacksaw had one. So
I don't think he did.
I just remember. He probably had one back in the late 80s, early 90s when he was a pretty popular superstar. I mean, probably wasn't like something that they pushed super hard, but I mean, I assume that, you know, they were cranking it up. I mean, they did like, 7 Hulkamania DVDs? VHSs?
They did 1, 2, 3, 4, Forever, and 6. There was never a 5.
Okay.
1, 2, 3.
No, they
Forever.
did make a Hacksaw Jim Duggan VHS. You know how I know that?
How do you know?
I have it.
You owned it.
Do you really? See, I don't have. That's one I don't have. I got to be honest. That's one I do not have. So I'll have to see if I can.
There's a match with Andre on there. There's a match with Boris Zukov. The best thing on the tape, and I had never seen this before, they show the Slammy Awards, and he gets into a fight with Harley Race, and it is one of the funniest damn things I've ever seen in wrestling. Like, it's stupid as hell, but it is so damn funny.
Didn't he dress up the board with like a bow tie?
Yes, I think he did.
I think he did, yeah.
So that was the 80s. I think they did the Slammies early on, and they were very funny. Go ahead, Nick. I'm sorry. Here's your question.
Well, I'm just gonna say this. Doesn't that technically make Hacksaw the first openly gay pro wrestler, since that means the board, which was always his date, was a male?
Wow, that's reaching.
That reminds me, I've been watching old episodes of Daria, and there was an episode where she was babysitting, and she was reading, like, old fairy tales to, like, the kids she was babysitting, and one of them was like, and the dish ran away with the spoon. But unfortunately, Hawaii was the only state that would recognize would recognize the union and shit like that. I thought it was really funny.
Oh boy, guys. Well, guys, let's see. So we're gonna do Brian Pillman as the last one then, the loose cannon character.
Yeah,
that's fine.
All right. And so here's our list then, guys, and see if we like it in the way it is. We got the top 5 most disappointing angles of all time. I don't know why I'm talking with a weird accent. Number 5, the loose cannon angle with Brian Pillman that extended over 3 companies, and it always had such potential, and it just never realized the whole thing, partially because of his death and car crashes. Number 4 was going to be the Lita, Edge, and Hardy storyline. All 3 of those people, including Lita, despite her reputation and all that with that point, could have walked out of there as main event stars, and eventually Edge and Lita kind of did, not so much with Hardy. Number 3.
Well, what do you mean not so much? It's a definite did not become a main event star.
There's still time. Number 3.
No, I think Hardy's done, dude.
He might main event the Omega reunion show.
All right, number 3.
Dude, TNA didn't even push him to the top. What does that say?
There you go.
Whenever they get an ex-WWE guy, that motherfucker goes straight to the moon usually. And Hardy, I don't recall ever seeing him win a match.
He beat AJ once, but that was when Flair turned on AJ.
Okay. There
you go. Number 3 is going to be the White Hummer angle in WCW, where you want to go for a ride? And Macho Man drives him into something, and then somebody smashes his limousine over and over again with a White Hummer, and you see Kevin Nash's hand come out and unlock the door, and the next week he's back, and he's fine, and he wants to know who ran into him, because apparently it hurt him real bad, but it didn't actually keep him out of any action, so everybody else was kind of like, who really cares? So, and the next thing was, number 2, the CM Punk character in the WWE, the entire thing, the entire run. He just feels like he's always been stop and go. And number 1 is going to be the NWO, and I think we're just going to say the entire NWO angle, be it 96, 99, or 2002 incarnations. They just never really, they never got there, because there was never really an ending. There was never an ending to the story.
I will say that I have a couple changes. I think Punk should be number 1, because even though the NWO never had a satisfactory end, it did have a great beginning and a pretty good middle. With Punk, I feel like we always got a pretty good start. We never even got the middle. And I would say for a couple of reasons, primarily the potential to make 3 people solid main event talents, that the Edge, Hardy, and Lita one should at least be above the White Hummer.
Would you agree with that, Pat? I'm fine with that if you want to do that.
I'm fine with that, yeah.
All right. So we're going to reorganize this one here. So we're going to have All right, number 5, Loose Cannon Brian Pillman storyline. Number 4, the White Hummer. Number 3, Lita, Edge, and Hardy. Number 2, the NWO. And number 1, CM Punk. How would that be? Top 5 most disappointing storylines of all time there, guys. Pretty depressing, but it leads us into our discussion about Raw this week. There's my segue, Pat. See, I could do it, too. So Raw, for those who didn't see it, Raw kicked off this week with not an empty arena, but basically nobody at the announcer's table. No pyro, nothing crazy going on. A somewhat confused crowd that seemed moderately aware of what was going on. Not the whole Raw feel that you usually get when it turns on, which was a merciful change, I think, for a start of Raw. It wasn't pyro, and then the guy comes in and cuts a promo for a half hour. There was just no pyro, but they got to still come out and could talk for a half hour. But Triple H came out, and it was basically him on his own, and then you had 3 guys come and join him, and establish some kind of union, which I think is a good thing. They built something to go forward with, and they established some kind of character traits of Sheamus, which I think will help him in the long run, because they, anytime anybody says that, explains their actions and explains that they deserve to get their ass kicked or whatever, as a tough guy, that kind of puts their credibility up a little bit, so I think that helped him out. And, Cena, everybody expected him to be there, and Punk did an okay job explaining his thing and okay job with the comedy spots on there. But segment 1 was great. Segment 2, holy shit, you can drive a bus through this mess here, the hole in this mess, and I'll let Nick kind of take that one away.
Well, actually, I think the best person to explain this, ladies and gentlemen, would be former show host Chuck D, who James fired a couple of years. Oh, wait, see, we're not going to bring Chuck D back because he was fired from the show. And that's the real problem. All of a sudden, Vince shows back up after he got fired. And then he proceeds to fire Triple H with no real explanation of how he's able to do that. And he puts Johnny Ace in charge. Wait, I'll say this. The first part of Raw felt different, and that's something that wrestling as a whole needs, to start feeling different again, not being the same formulaic show every single week. But then they went right back to the formula.
Pretty much.
What?
And now we have another Raw GM in John Laurinaitis, which, why should I give a damn about this guy being in charge? Why should I care if Triple H is in charge or Vince? I mean, is the show any different depending on who's in charge?
Right. Well, I guess now it's like, now we got a heel boss. But, another issue I kind of have is that John Laurinaitis, they said, is only the GM of Raw. So technically that means Triple H is still the COO, which shouldn't that be the issue, that they don't want him in charge of the whole company? Once again, I mean, it seems like they completely forget about SmackDown and all these angles, where it's like, yeah, you do have another show. When the NFL went through a lockout, the issue wasn't, well, we don't like what's going on in the NFC, so everyone's going to go play on the AFC. The issue was league-wide. And then the big kicker for me was at the end of the show, they brought back R-Truth and Miz, which I'm thinking, okay, the reason everyone turned on Triple H was because he couldn't get control over the situation when R-Truth and Miz came down and beat people up. Yet Johnny Ace can rehire them, and that doesn't lead to another walkout?
And my question is, how was, number one, you brought up a great point. I thought Triple H was in charge of the whole company, not just Raw, so why was everybody boycotting just Raw when Triple H is in charge of everything? I mean, up until now, we've been led to believe that Triple H was in charge of everything, so that made no sense. And number two, how was the show any different from the usual? It's like, oh, it's chaos. It's this. People are getting hurt. I'm like, dude, that happens every week, and it has been for over a decade. Where have you been? Like, since, close to 15 years, somebody gets hurt or beat up every week. And referees get hurt, and announcers get attacked. I mean, there's nothing. Triple H broke Jim Ross's arm back in '99. Does anybody remember that?
I remember they had a match and JR won. I mean, I remember that one.
it was like the night after SummerSlam where instead of Triple H winning the belt for the first time, Mick Foley won it for the third time. And the idea was supposed to be that Triple H was so pissed off, he grabbed Ross and said, "If you don't give me a match, Mick Foley, I'm going to break your little buddy's arm here."
Yeah, that's what happened. But yeah, this idea that under Triple H the whole show is under chaos and it can't be controlled, when it's really not any different from what it's been the last 15 years or so.
And that's the problem with the storytelling. That's the problem with the storytelling. They had to do an angle where there was some chaotic character that kept hitting the referees and stuff, and they say, well, this guy keeps hitting us, and then he gets a partner, and then he starts hitting all the referees. They need to start telling these stories little by little instead of just this conglomerate of chaos and then saying, well, here's the problem. And it's like, well, yeah, but as you said, this is basically the same crap that we've seen for the past decade, so how can you finger point anything that says, well, it changed when he was in charge? There was no difference in anything. And storyline-wise, Triple H is saying the same thing. That's what he's saying character-wise. He's saying, how is it any different? And then, it's kind of like, okay, great, but...
Well, and then, at one point I thought it was a great, just to further that a little bit, you had, Beth Phoenix saying, well, the Divas are concerned that they're going to get attacked, and Triple H even kind of looked at her like, and I don't blame Beth because she was just doing what she was told, but it's like, when have the Divas ever, what has happened to the Divas since I took over?
Yeah, the only thing that ever happened was that night Beth got her head knocked in, and then apparently she was fine because 20 minutes later she came out and cut that promo. So,
right. So unless Miz somehow turned into Kelly, Beth can't blame anything on Triple H.
It really didn't make any sense, and the elements were not planted very well, and the simple storytelling says you have to have these things happen for them to be addressed in a major story that they're supposed to do, and there was really no incidents thereof. The only people who ever really hit the referees were Miz and Truth, and they were already fired. So, it's kind of like we're mad at you for not doing anything about it, but he did. He fired the guys, so it didn't make any sense.
Right, and then the problem is they're also trying to do this whole storyline of, well, somebody's sabotaging Triple H. That's why the mics cut out when he and Punk are talking. That's why the cage went up to get R-Truth and Miz back in, and then it went back down. But it's like, look, everyone could see this 5 miles away. I was, reading a review, and it was when Triple H kind of it was not this week, but last week when Triple H kind of said to Johnny Ace, I think you're behind all of this. Somebody said, well, congratulations, Triple H. You just figured out what everyone else did weeks ago.
Look, I find Blue's Clues more challenging than this storyline.
You know what it reminds me of? Has anybody seen Troll 2?
What's it called?
Yes, Nick. Troll 2?
No, I've not seen Troll 2, no.
Okay, well, it's notoriously one of the worst movies ever made, and because it's so bad, it's hilarious. But the goblins, there are no trolls in this movie, which that tells you how good it is. It's called Troll 2, but there are no trolls. The goblins, this family winds up in a city full of goblins, and the name of the town is Nilbog, which is obviously goblins spelled backwards. And no character in the movie figures it out or makes that connection until about 45 minutes in, which is about when the movie's half over. And the little kid's like, Nilbog, it's goblins spelled backwards. It's like, wow, thank you, Captain Obvious. Took you half the movie to figure that out.
Oh, Lord.
So, that was our Raw. And you know what? The show was average, but the opening had a chance to be at least something different. And if you remember the dying days of WCW, and for some reason that's the way this feels right now, and I don't know why, but that's the way WWE stories feel right now, like the dying days of WCW. You remember the certain episodes that were complete and utter chaos the best, and you think of those as the good shows. Like, there was an episode of Thunder where the referees, very similar to this story, all walked out and said, you guys keep hitting us, we've had enough, we're out of here. So the guys basically had playground rules, and the guys had to be their own referees in the matches. I remember that Thunder very well. It was actually very cool. You had Hogan pinning Mike Awesome and having to count himself. It was pretty cool. Actually, I think he fought Scott Steiner that night. And, Sting and all that, and then versus Vampiro. And there was, a lot of crazy stuff happening, but they were doing their own referee work, and obviously you couldn't do that all the time because that just wouldn't work. But for that show, it was chaos and it was interesting. You know, do something like that. They could have done that with this Raw. They could have done something where all the referees weren't there, so okay, whoever was on the willing to cross the line and come work had to basically be their own referee. Fine, you know, it's interesting. You're going to remember it. You're going to talk about it. Hence, case in point, I'm talking about this one 11 years later. So.
Yeah, I mean, or if we want to use the TNA example, the episode where the Main Event Mafia took over the show, I thought that was one of the best episodes of Impact the entire time the Main Event Mafia was there.
Conversely, one of the worst episodes of Nitro was when the NWO took over Nitro.
Right. Well, the thing about the key difference was there wasn't, they did the takeover, like, before the show started. There wasn't, like, a 30-minute segment of them running around making all the cameramen put on NWO T-shirts, cutting down the WCW signs, and, you know, running a brand-new entrance video. It's kind of like, I think in the death of WCW, somebody said, if you ever wondered how they set up the arena before a wrestling show, boy, was this the Nitro for you. Which I mean, I agree with Patrick. I love that episode of Nitro of Impact, because it was just fun. It was so different, and it was something that worked for the one night. It wasn't going to work long term, but it was a fun one night, and they had the opportunity to kind of do that. And I think what they almost should have done was, last week they had almost everybody walk out. You felt like what they should have done is they should have had a certain group of wrestlers walk out, but still have some maintain saying, hey, look, I'm behind Triple H. You know, create an issue where have like a bare bones skeleton crew and just do something different for the night. And maybe at the end of the night, that's when you have, you know, Vince come back, or you have Triple H get replaced, instead of just doing it at the beginning, midway through the first hour.
Yeah, do it and then basically have him come out, and he could even say when he comes out, you see what the show's become under you? It's complete and utter chaos and all that. And you know what? Then there'd be something to go on. But the one segment of an incomplete match was just... Plus, Vince shouldn't have been the one to come out to fire him anyway, because he has basically no power storyline-wise, and that's just ridiculous. But anyway, segueing, speaking of the Impact that we liked, Bound for Glory is this Sunday, and it'll be the first pay-per-view that I'm going to be buying of TNA's. Nick, don't be mad. It's going to be the first one I'm actually going to be paying for since the Wednesday night pay-per-views.
Holy shit, really?
Yeah, I've not bought another one. I've got tapes sent to me, or I've gotten...
you downloaded them?
Online downloads, that's right, yeah. I won't say anything else than that, but yeah. Or bought the DVD later on, you know, I have done that. I do have some of the DVDs. But I did not order them live on pay-per-view. So this will be the first one I'm actually going to pay for in a while. Long while.
Well, yeah. I'm going to smack you across your goddamn face.
Here, I thought he was going to be happy with me.
Well, I was going to be happy, because if you had just said, it's going to be the first one I bought in a while, stop. You're basically saying you've been stealing from the company for how many goddamn years, you son of a bitch?
Well, I bought a lot of them on DVD.
7 years, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't matter. Buy the pay-per-view. I'm not saying buy every single one, because I know how expensive that can be. But seriously, you're honestly going to tell me that there isn't, like, well, there has not been enough, like, where at least, say, 3 matches were really good enough you had said, okay, I'll buy. I want to see that live. It actually funded the company and maybe show your support for the company and show the support for the wrestlers that you like?
I am. That's why I'm ordering this one. I want to see Hogan wrestle. Or fight, I should say.
Or see him still and not
See, you know what? People need to stop making a big deal out of that. You've got all these different wrestling news sites saying TNA is calling it a fight instead of a match. I'm like, here's the thing. That's been brought up a million times before, where guys say, look, this isn't going to be a wrestling match. This is going to be you and me, and we're going to have a fight. It's going to be a fight. Hell, Shawn Michaels, I think when he first came back to wrestle Triple H, he said, you know what, Hunter, you're right. I can't wrestle anymore, but I can fight you.
And yeah,
look,
what they made it was a hardcore match. That's all.
Exactly. And look, this is not just me now that these two guys are going to go in the back lot and smack out. They're still going to have a wrestling match. I assume there will be a referee. I assume they will get in the wrestling ring. The idea is it's not just going to be your quote, your straight, okay, exchange of arm bars and body slams. It's going to be a more physical fight for these two guys.
Could be a lot of guys punching and kicking and things like that. That's what it's going to be. It's not going to be a lot of wrestling moves, and part of that is Hogan's limitations, and part of that is because the storyline would warrant more of a hardcore fight based on it. So,
look what they did on Thursday, where basically Sting embarrassed Hogan. He exposed them as a fraud, and it pissed Hogan off so much he finally just snapped and said the things he knew that were stupid. And he agreed to do it, even though he's been saying, it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen. Then finally he got so pissed, all right, it is going to happen.
Okay, here's what I want to leave you guys with. We talked all the time about how the NWO was one of the, I think it came in number 2 on our list of the unfinished angles. And a lot of that stems from the Starrcade main event between Hogan and Sting that never finished. There was never a right ending to it. This storyline should reach a bubble on Sunday.
Yes,
the storyline leading in has always been Sting saying to Hogan, Bischoff is a cancer. It's going to have to come down to Hogan has a choice. He can either cut off Bischoff's head or he can either cut off Dixie Carter's head. There is no gray area here. The storyline has to be Hogan has a crossroads, a fork in the road. He has no choice but to either hulk up and fight back and become what Sting wants him to be, the good guy again, or go down the bad guy route with Bischoff. And the storyline has to be that Hogan, turns on Bischoff.
You know what? I'll even say you don't have to do it at the pay-per-view. I think what needs to happen is Hogan loses to Sting. And then you say, well, what's going to... Well, and that's just it. I would leave it at that. Hogan beats Sting, and then you have Tenay and Taz going, Hogan lost. That means 60 Carter's in charge of this company again. What's going to happen on Thursday? And then you go from there. I don't want there to be. My big fear is if you do that and you do the whole, who's Hogan going to choose? What side is he going to choose on? It takes away from the actual main event, which will be Rude and Angle, according to Hogan's interviews on ESPN today.
Yeah, what I would do, by the way, with that, here's how I would play it. Hogan, they should take the Hogan Rock spot, and Liam, this time I don't think they're going to steal the show. And there should be a filler match between that and the main event, and the main event should be, by all accounts, Rude versus Angle. And I don't care who wins that match, but I give them credit. They've really done a great job building up Rude with his Bound for Glory series.
I think Rude should go over. Well, I absolutely think Rude's victory would kind of be the stamp on this pay-per-view that they need.
I agree.
If Rude does,
I'll see you guys next week, though. But yeah, I agree, and I'm looking forward to the pay-per-view. And next week I'll review it, but I'll let you guys finish her up, okay?
All right.
Okie dokie.
Well, as we said, ladies and gentlemen, this Sunday is Bound for Glory. It is TNA's biggest pay-per-view of the year, and I'll say this: there's some stuff on here that I think has the potential to be some really good matches. There's a lot of, I'll be honest, I'm not happy with a lot of the builds. I kind of feel like, they've tried to build something. I think part of that is not trying to do too much, not trying to do too little, but it hasn't always worked out. For example, I love the way they built up Rude, where they had him win the Bound for Glory series, and I liked how they pulled off the Bound for Glory series with, you really didn't know who was going to win it until the end. Most people were saying, oh, well, it's going to be this Crimson guy, it's going to be this Crimson guy, it's going to be this Crimson guy, and I'm thinking,
that's what I said.
It's like, well, here's the thing, I almost said this. They almost kind of pulled it off like the NFL playoffs last year, where you had a team like the Falcons or the Patriots that pretty much ran away with the whole regular season, had home field advantage. Then you had, something came up and they didn't win it, but you had kind of this old, reliable, everyone loves them team. In this case, Robert Roode playing the Green Bay Packers, and look who's now got in the Super Bowl. And I mean they even had an injury story last year. Remember the Packers had how many guys that were injured, and Roode had his shoulder.
I think didn't Rodgers have a concussion or something that kept him out a couple games?
Yeah, they were either playing, I can't remember, it was a Sunday night game. They either played the Patriots, I think it was the Patriots, and the Patriots were on that winning streak where they weren't losing games last year during the regular season. Just week after week, they just were rolling over teams, and the backup came in and played really well. Yeah, so I think Rogers missed it. Rogers missed one game. And, I mean, I love kind of the story that they've been doing on Impact where Angle's like, you know what, Robert Roode, I'm going to make you fight your buddies in a fortune. And it's pretty clear what he's trying to do. He's trying to tear apart the support system, Roode's buddies, his backup. And he's also hoping maybe if Roode loses one of these matches, well, then that kills Roode's momentum. But instead, Roode's just getting stronger and stronger and stronger every week. And I also like that, notice one thing that's happened since Roode became number one contender. Robert Roode and Kurt Angle have not brawled with each other. They haven't had a tag match against each other. They've actually been able to build a storyline without the two guys getting in a physical confrontation.
Yeah, and that's good. They've done, of all the things on Bound for Glory, I think this Roode and Angle main event is the most interesting thing they have. I think it's the best thing they have. And I think if Roode and Angle go out there and have in the main event spot and Roode wins the title, I think that'll be a great ending to go out on.
Exactly. If Roode doesn't win the belts, if Roode wins the belts, it's a great moment. If Roode doesn't win the belts, it's one of those things of like, well, it's going to be one of those excuses of probably, well, everyone thought he was going to win the belt and we want to trick him. Sometimes when people know what's going to come, you should just do it anyway because that's what the people ultimately want.
Right.
You know, it's like when you went and saw The Dark Knight, the movie The Dark Knight. Everyone wanted Batman to ultimately win in the end, which he did win. He didn't win perfectly, but if the movie had ended with the Joker killing Batman, everyone would have been like, well, that sucks. You know?
Yeah.
We want Robert Roode. Fans want Robert Roode to win this match, especially longtime TNA fans, which the two of us on this line right now are very long-term TNA fans. We've loved Robert Roode for years. We're ready to see this guy get the big one.
Absolutely.
That is my big fear. I do fear that that we're going to have the classic case of, oh my God, everyone sees this coming. We should just put it off for another month. Which a lot of times when they do that, it just really winds up hurting the eventual win.
It does. Trying to think of an example where that happened. Well, I'll use the WWE example. They built up Orton to WrestleMania 25 like he was going to be, quote, the next Triple H. Those were their exact words. So everybody thought he was going to win the belt at Mania because that's just how they were building him up. They build him up to Mania, he loses, and he wins the belt a month later in a tag match, and it just really felt weak.
Yeah, it did. It does hurt you when you don't win, when that big win doesn't happen when you expect it to. You know, it does. It just pulls down everything you've done to build up. And I really think they're ready to give Robert Roode this opportunity. And I think there's a lot you can do with it. You know, if Robert Roode wins, first, you could do a rematch with Kurt Angle. Which right off the bat, that would be at least interesting. Like, okay, Angle's gonna be like, okay, you beat me at Bound for Glory, but I don't think you can do it again, kid. And then maybe
the obvious good thing they could do is a feud between him and Storm, which a lot of people are thinking. Yeah, a lot of people are thinking that Storm's going to turn heel at this pay-per-view. If that's in the works, I would suggest holding off on it.
Right. You know what? I will say that I do think they're going to do that. I don't think he's going to charge the pay-per-view, but if you saw Impact, you saw it where Roode came out, Angle came out during the Roode and Storm match and actually cost Storm the match. I think he's doing that to plant the seeds to cause friction between these two down the road. I don't want it to happen at the pay-per-view. Even if it's like after the match, like when Roode's celebrating the title and he's holding up the belt, and then and if Storm comes out and hits him, I'm going to feel like that you don't need to do it right then and there. I'm a big believer that fans want to enjoy the celebration. It's like when your team wins the Super Bowl. You want to jump up and down, you want to scream, and you want to cry, and you want to watch them hand, your quarterback the Lombardi Trophy.
Right.
You want to see that moment. And sometimes it happens. I mean, I'll argue with anyone that it was stupid to have The Undertaker choke slam CM Punk, because instead of ending the show with CM Punk this was at SummerSlam a couple years ago, and instead of ending the show of, oh my God, what happens now? CM Punk's beat Jeff Hardy. It was, oh, The Undertaker's back. I guess he's the next feud.
Right.
You know, when you have a great moment like that, you don't want to take away from that moment.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
Right. As for Hogan and Sting, I think we said it last week, they're going to gimmick the hell out of this match. Expect run-ins galore. Seriously, like,
oh, this is going to be an overbook. Yeah.
This is going to be a Raven match. What I mean by that is back in ECW, where everybody and his mother would run into Raven's matches, including the Sandman's son.
Yeah, this one's going to be, and I think that's the only thing they can do, because I can't, in his condition, I can't picture Hogan being able to do much more than that.
He might surprise us, but even if he's able to, like, you know, rally up and he takes like a pain injection and he does the leg drop, it's not going to last. He won't be able to do a whole lot progressively for, you know, more than at best 5 minutes. And that is going to be a miracle. And, you know, maybe, and here's the thing, sometimes it's not so bad to have big run-ins. I mean, why not? I mean, you have Gunner, who they pretty much portray as Immortal's attack dog. Have him go out there and have him lay out Sting and kill a couple minutes. And maybe you send out, you know, AJ, you know, who's, you know, have like some of the faces rally back and have it kind of be like, okay, the faces have taken their side in this and they want Dixie Carter back. Or, you know, something like that, you know. And I do expect Bischoff to come out and maybe Jeff Hardy. I mean, Jeff Hardy is unbooked for this pay-per-view, which we'll have to get into like how they're kind of booking that long term a little bit like at a later date, but I want to, you know, I wouldn't mind seeing Jeff Hardy come out, and maybe he costs, you know, maybe he makes the savior. It's kind of like another thing of, okay, I screwed up, and I'm just desperately trying to make it right, and you can have him explain that later on. And I'm actually going to be fine with a lot of runs, because quite honestly, as Patrick said, they can't do a whole lot more with this match. I mean, Hogan's limitations, and I love Sting, and I think that the Joker character gave him a new life, but he kind of needs someone to carry him in these matches. He's not going to be the guy anymore that is he's not the guy that can have the match with the broom and make it entertaining at this stage in his career.
I'll tell you what, though, people can laugh at me all they want. His match with Flair a few weeks ago was not as bad as I expected. Mind you, Flair broke his arm in the match, but I thought it might be his hip instead. But it wasn't that bad of a match.
No, it wasn't. But part of that also was that it was not a very long match. You know, it wasn't.
But they also it wasn't like an old guy's match though. They did the superplexes. They did all that kind of stuff. They basically brought out a lot of their old tricks and did them. And you know, it was a fine match. It was not, you know, the greatest thing ever, but I expected a damn train wreck, and it really wasn't. Right.
And I'm thinking we might kind of get that out of this, where we'll see Hogan and Sting pull out some of the old tricks. But
I think the fans will make or break the match as well.
Yeah.
That's another thing I'm concerned about. I don't see the Philly crowd being very receptive to this match.
But you know what? As much as Philly gets this weird rep as being like this rebellious, hardcore, shit audience, to a certain extent, that has died off the last couple of years. And I don't care what somebody tries to convince me of. That has died off. A lot of that has to do with the fact that the hardcore ECW company is no longer there.
Plus, I mean, hardcore ECW fans have grown up and actually slept with a woman.
Right. Things have changed. Will there always be that element? Yeah. But you know what? There's always going to be that element in every wrestling crowd you go to. You know? No matter where you go. I mean, you're going to get I went to a house show out here in Nebraska, and there was this one idiot that kept screaming, you know, all night, you know, just stupid shit, you know, like stuff like, hey, AJ, you have to do all these flippy moves if you don't know how to actually wrestle. I'm just like, everyone's just kind of like yelling at the guy finally at the end, just shut the fuck up.
He wrestled in high school, didn't he?
yeah, he did. But you know what? It's like that's his. Look, when you're a lighter guy, when you're a lighter guy in pro wrestling, a lot of times you're going to do more aerodynamic, more aero moves because that's just what happens. I mean, it's just kind of the way that the pro wrestling business works. That's why, for the most part, you know, unless you're someone like Matt Morgan or, you know, who's really athletic, big guys do a lot of power moves. You know, as hard as we are and say Great Khali, he's not a guy that can go out there and do a 450 splash.
Nor should he try to.
I would like to see him try it just because I think that would be the world's greatest botch ever.
What would he try to do it to? I mean, I can't imagine who they would even have him, who would be willing to take it. Hey, we got an 800-pound guy who looks like an oak tree. He'd like to do a big splash off the top rope. Who wants to take that one? Not me. Not me. Maybe Matt Hardy. He's suicidal. Or Sonny. Sonny, possibly Sonny.
Oh, Lord. But
By the way, I've contacted Sonny and I've sent her a message, and this is the truth. And those who don't believe me, I'm telling you the honest truth right now. I've told her.
I will vouch for him. I saw it on Facebook.
Yeah, I basically said, cut the crap. I said, get down off the cross, use the wood to build a bridge, and get over it. Cut the crap. Stop drinking. Get help. Vince is offering it, and cut the crap. I'm sick and tired of statistics, and I'm saying it here. If she ends up dead, it's not for. I'm not going to sit here, you know, if she ends up dead in 6 months and say, oh, well, I wish I had said something, because I did. So
what's been going on with her? I haven't heard anything about Sonny.
She's becoming a raging alcoholic again and no showing events.
Like she posted even like something like online about how like she's so depressed lately, you know, she's having all these issues. She basically wrote like this long letter online about like, yeah, you know, life is just so tough, you know, and yada yada yada. I think essentially she posted like she basically posted a cry for help online. She more or less said, look, my life sucks, somebody help me.
Well, let Vince help her. He'll help her. She's in the Hall of Fame. Vince obviously thinks she offered a lot to the company, and I think you can argue she did. So he'll send her to rehab if she needs it. Let him get her help.
Well, look, Matt Hardy is supposedly on that WWE-sponsored rehab. The way I understand that it works is that if you are a former employee of the WWE, contact them. They will help you.
I'm going to make it clear. Ric Flair was in rehab. He's never worked for the WWE, and WWE put him up in rehab.
You know, and some of you might, you know, and you know, some of you might argue, oh well, they're doing that because of all the criticism, you know, about Benoit and the other rest of the guys. So what?
It's the right thing to do. You can't fault them for that at all.
If it helps these people that have these very serious issues in a business we've seen so many people die so young, who cares why they're doing it? Hello?
Hello, I'm here. Yeah, y'all are absolutely right. Totally.
Yeah. All right. So I think that's.
I wish I had more to add to that.
Yeah. I think that's pretty much our show for this week, Pat. I mean, we talked Bound for Glory, we talked Raw, we got our top 5 in. Not really a whole lot more. Not really a whole lot more we have to talk about. I guess The Rock's coming back in November, so we'll talk about it then.
And the Muppets are going to be on in a couple weeks on WWE Raw.
Yeah.
Which, how does James feel about that? James, are you still there? No, he's not. Okay. Never mind.
Yeah, well, we can ask him about it next week.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm actually, and this is kind of my take on it, because I've seen what they do with their guest notes, and it's usually bad. And I just feel like, are the Muppets too good for this? Because I don't want to see them get disgraced or anything.
You know what? I actually do think the Muppets are too good for this.
All righty. Well, that's our show for the week. Thank you, Nick, for being on the line with me the whole time. Thank you, James, for setting up the show. And thank you, everybody, for listening. If you're going to order Bound for Glory this weekend, I hope you all enjoy it. And we'll see you all whenever we do our next show, which will probably be next week.